Have you checked the children? You're a little mad sometimes.
Hi, I'm Chucky. Wanna play?
Sometimes that is better.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Horror Show. I'm Cecil, Laird, here to review the new Resident Evil 3 Remake release. So it took me a couple of days to get through this, mainly because it's really short compared to the Resident Evil 2 Remake that came out last year. But let's dive into it. I'm going to give this review the usual treatment, my overall thoughts, and I'll talk about the gameplay, the graphics, the sound design, a lot of other stuff regarding it. But this is, again, Resident Evil 3's remake, which they just did Resident Evil 2 Remake last year, which was phenomenal. I absolutely love that game. Played through it with both characters to get the full experience. This one is a bit different. While it is just as gorgeous looking, it is definitely a bit lacking in some areas. So I guess my overall thoughts are, I enjoyed the game. I think it was too high a price point for what you end up getting. It's the same cost, $60, full price video game right now. Same as Resident Evil 2 was, but Resident Evil 2 had a lot more material to it in my estimation. So let's get into it. First off, the graphics of this game, and I'm not going to have as many clips to show as I did for the Doom review because I unfortunately had some issues with my Elgato and it wasn't capturing correctly, so I didn't get most of the footage of my gameplay, unfortunately. So I'm just going to drop in what I can, but guys, this game is gorgeous, and it is really well done. It's done on the same engine that they did Resident Evil 2 Remake on. There's even a few assets reused, like a couple of locations. That's partly because Resident Evil 3 takes place kind of concurrently with Resident Evil 2. Same location at times, a couple of character interactions, perhaps, or at least one character makes it to both, maybe not in his live format, but nonetheless, the game was gorgeous looking. It's still just tremendous. The zombies look great, although I don't think they had quite the same zombie physics that they had in the last game, because the last game you could really focus your fire on certain limbs, and it seemed like more destructibility to the zombies in the last remake than there was in this one, but it was still fun. All the zombies still looked really cool. And obviously, Nemesis, the namesake of the game, and the original was Resident Evil 3 Nemesis. They just did Resident Evil 3 Remake for this one, but Nemesis is the main antagonist. He's the guy on the front cover, and they did some interesting stuff with him. Now, honestly, it's been so long since I played the original, since it came out, really, that I don't remember what happened with Nemesis, but I thought I remembered him maintaining a mostly human form throughout the game, but that's not necessarily the way things go. They do change some stuff up in this to make it more interesting, but not all changes are for the better, unfortunately. But yeah, graphically, it's gorgeous. It is just a phenomenal game to behold. The street level and everything like that is really awesome. The hospital is, it's a hospital environment, but even though I don't have footage to show you, there was tons of really cool production design in the hospital. I mean, there was barricaded areas where humans were trying to hide from the zombies, but there's basically blood and gore smeared everywhere in the hospital, and I was just kind of walking slowly with my flashlight to really drink it all in as a horror fan. It was really, really cool, and just a place of maximum carnage left. And it's just really, the game just looks phenomenal. Now, the gameplay itself is also really good. They made a little bit of a change where now there's a dodge mechanic where you can, move out of the way of someone lunging at you. You don't lose knives when you stab them into zombies. You can't use them to escape zombies, to stab them and get away, and then retrieve your knife if you destroy the zombie. There's none of that. You have a regular knife, but it's a lot weaker, it feels like, than the Resident Evil 2 knife. But yeah, I mean, everything else is pretty much the same. Inventory system is the same. You pick up things. What they did change is every time you pick it up, it doesn't go, poof, green herb, green herb. If you pick up something after the first time, it just goes right into your inventory. So that was nice. It kind of saves some time there. Story-wise, the story isn't as engaging to me as Resident Evil 2 was. mostly because this game is mostly action. It's a very action-oriented game. You're constantly on the move, running from something, most usually Nemesis, and then there's, you know, lots of there's zombies, there's lickers, there's hunters, so there's a few different kinds of creatures that you're going to run into throughout your, realistically, 5 to 7 hour campaign. Some people finished it even less than 5 hours. I took almost 7 because I was doing a lot of backtracking to save points, because every time I'd go and pick up a gunpowder before heading into a new, what I would assume a difficult area would be, I would run back to the box and grab a gunpowder I had put away and combine them, and then run back, get halfway there, find an explosive container that I could run back to my box and combine with another explosive container for some grenade rounds. So I took time to do that, and even doing that, I only got to just under 7 hours, like 6 hours and 50 minutes or something like that. So it is a pretty short game, you guys, and you can finish it in about 5. Next time, I'll know what I'm doing, so when I play through it again, it'll probably be closer to 5 for me. But, you know, I sometimes am of the opinion that a shorter game isn't necessarily a bad thing. Call of Duty, I don't play the multiplayer, and the main campaign's usually around 6 hours or so. I don't mind that, but I don't buy those games. I rent those games, so I don't spend full price on a 6 hour campaign. This would have been much better priced instead of $60 at $40, or if it was just set up straight as a DLC at this point for Resident Evil 2. Because if you're not going to do the full Resident Evil 3 game, they did cut out an entire area, the clock tower, from Resident Evil 3, they just cut out. So if you're not going to do the whole game, and if it's only going to be 5 to 6 hours long, just make it a DLC. That's what some DLCs, the Borderlands DLC is about 5 to 6 hours long, stuff like that. So might as well just make it a DLC, price it at $30 for the DLC, since you don't have to actually put out a disc for it. And then it would have been golden. It would have felt worth it. But this, it's too short. It didn't feel worth it for me. But again, going back to the review of it all, the gameplay was still fun. It's just there's not enough of it. Now, one of the mechanics that did change is Nemesis versus Mr. X. So in Resident Evil 2's remake, Mr. X was kind of this ever-present presence that you would run into occasionally. It seemed to be a bit random when you'd run into him. Obviously, sometimes were triggered, but he could really stumble on you, and you'd hear those ominous footsteps coming, and you had to quicken your step in order to get away. I thought, after playing Resident Evil 2, I was like, oh, the Nemesis is going to be awesome if they do a remake like this. I was wrong because of the way they did it, I think. It wasn't that way with Nemesis. Towards the beginning of the game, at some point when you trigger it, then Nemesis starts to chase you around, kind of herding you in a particular direction to progress the game. That's kind of the only time that he can appear sort of at random while you're trying to clean up the streets area before you move on in the game. After that point, there's never a time when Nemesis randomly starts to chase after you or anything. Anytime Nemesis shows up, it's a scripted event that's essentially the equivalent of a QTE event in a God of War game. You know, you're running, and you got to do certain things, and mostly it's out of your control actually in these. You just run, you just hold the joystick, and it does everything else for you, and then you let the scene play out. So the times you're actually interacting with Nemesis, it's scripted, and it's not that fun. It's not interesting the way Mr. X was, unfortunately. So it was a bummer. And there's no mercenaries mode or anything. Like, after you beat the game, you can't do like run-throughs with other characters like you could in the original Resident Evil 3. Do like, you know, a unlimited rocket launcher run or anything like that. None of that's in the game. So it's just the single-player experience that doesn't even have the other character's story, you know. So in Resident Evil 2, there were 2 characters, Leon and Claire, I believe, and you could play through the game as either one, and it would change a little bit. It would change a little bit depending on who you did it. This game, it's just Jill's story, and you get to play as Carlos a couple of times in the middle of it. But that's it. There's no going back for any reason or anything like that. So the replay value is definitely lower than Resident Evil 2 was. Resident Evil 2 even had those time attack modes, but there's Nothing like that in Resident Evil 3 Remake, unfortunately. The other thing I wanted to hit on is the sound design. So the sound design was really cool, and the Nemesis going stars was still really cool, even though it didn't happen nearly enough for my taste. But the sound was really good. It was still enjoyable. Obviously, with the headphones, everything works really well. But the weird thing is the lip syncing was off for a really good portion of the game. At times, I was like, oh, did we get the Japanese port? Because they didn't match at all. I was like, they're not even speaking the same words. But then at other times of the game, the lips would sync up sometimes. Usually with Jill, it would sync up okay, but it's the secondary characters where it starts to fade off.
You okay?
What was that thing?
Do I not have my
Damn
thing
fine now.
here? I don't.
But right now it's got a hard on for the only 2 stars left in town. You and me.
Swell.
I'm not sticking around. Just look around you. The longer we wait, the more
Monsters with hard-ons are awesome. And it was like, it's taking me out of the game. I'm like, we're past this. We need to, the lip syncing needs to work nowadays in games. It doesn't, I don't know, it doesn't work for me when it doesn't. So that was I guess a little bit of a nitpick, but just another issue I had with it. So it's weird. Resident Evil 3 Remake is a mixed bag. I'm glad I have it because alongside Resident Evil 2, they're a fun, double time. So I could play through Resident Evil 2 and then play through Resident Evil 3. It'd feel like kind of one cohesive story. I like that about it, but I am not happy with the price I paid for it. I'm stuck having paid for it, and it's not a huge deal, but yeah, it's kind of a bummer that it costs so much for so little, but that's what it is. So let me know if you guys played this game in the comments down below. If you did, what did you think of it? Do you think it was worth the full $60 price tag? I'd love to know what all of your thoughts are, so let me know in the comments down below. While you're down there, click the like button if you enjoyed the video and subscribe to make sure you don't miss other reviews going forward. But for now, thanks again for watching. I've been Cecil Laird, and remember, stay scared.